everybody. Hello. We're from Lexington Laser Corporation. My name's Andrew, Carlos, Leeway, and Brian. We're going to talk to you about an issue we're having with a manufacturing step called the pigtail step. And how we have a low yield rate right now. We're trying to increase that. Brian's going to talk to you about the background of the case, let you know about the data now, like what we looked at initially. Carlos is then going to step into the data analysis. Leeway is going to give us the recommendations and possible implementations of it, and then I'll follow up with the possible factors, other things that we could analyze in the case. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so the background of the case is we have a company called Lexington Laser Corporation, and they manufacture specialized chipsets, and they've been having a problem with their production yield of a particular step in the process known as the pigtail step, like Andrew said. Over the last several weeks, the problem has gotten worse. It started out initially as just an issue with during the welding step, but now it's progressed, and some of the modules are actually failing the subsequent temperature cycling step. So because of these problems, there have been it's created a lot of tension amongst the employees and the management, and a lot of finger pointing about who's responsible, who or what is responsible. So in order to figure out and solve the problem, management got together and basically pooled their resources and came up with 5 possible factors that they all agreed were likely the cause of the issue. So to address this further, we have, and those 5 factors were, the first one was operator experience, which seemed kind of intuitive. There was a range of experience from, I think it was 18 months to 2 years of experience on each lot for the operators. So we felt that that was going to be one of the likely ones because the less experience would probably lead to more issues. The next factor was recent exposure to pigtail, which was how much time, which was the percentage of time the operator had spent with pigtail during the pigtail step over the last year. The next one was the time of day, and this, while it didn't really seem that intuitive initially, we felt it was a factor because it was the time of day that it was the number of hours since the beginning of the shift that the operator was introduced, or the law was introduced into the laser weld process. This kind of led into the next factor, which was the room temperature. Because of the difference in the time of day, the average room temperature was likely going to vary a little bit. And the final factor we felt that was a possible factor was the welder maintenance, and that was the number of months since the last tune-up. So to talk further, we have Carlos.
Okay, so we use these data. We analyze one by one and deeply into the data. For example, what happened to the yield rate when the room temperature is high or low? I do the same thing to the remaining 5 factors, as well as the combinations of the data. And we finally found that the combination of the recent exposure to the pigtail process and the maintenance period would be the strong result close to the actual data. So we picked these 2 as the indicators of our model. The next slide shows that the related plot between the recent exposure and the yield, and it's similar. There's some upwarding trend between these 2 data. And the next slide shows the downgrading trend. The more the period after the maintenance is, the more the yield rate declining. So from these analyses, we are going to make some recommendation. Leeway will explain about our recommendation.
Okay, based on our model, we can see that 1% increase of our workers' exposure to pigtail, the yield will increase by 0.49%. So we recommend that we should pick up experienced workers and just let them to operate the pigtails. And another point we found that is that if we increase the maintenance period by 1 month, then our final yield would drop by 1.55%. It is a very significant amount, so we recommend that we should make a regular schedule to maintain the machine. And we can also find that if we just keep the worker operate this machine day by day, they will feel unhappy and boring, and their productivity will drop significantly. So we still need to rotate them to different machines, but less frequently. And we still need to pay attention to the cost of maintaining the machine. Just imagine that if right now the best maintenance period is 6 weeks, if the cost of maintenance increase, we should longer the maintenance period and vice versa. And Andrew will talk about some other possible improvements to our models.
So we've got a few other improvements to the model we actually ran. The duration of the samples, so our sample size, first of all, the duration was about a year, but we've run into more issues recently, and that wasn't broken out. If we had a way to compare the recent data versus the past data, it would be much more beneficial to kind of pinpoint where some of the problems are. Also, the sample size is only 55 lots, and that's fine for overall data analysis. But when we try to break it out and look at the top section of the temperature or the bottom section of the temperature, or specific times of day, we ran into small sets of data, and it really started to affect the accuracy of the model. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we could define what type of failure it was. We mentioned that there was 2 different primary types of failures that are happening. If we could break those out into 2 separate sections of data, we could analyze each one individually and possibly find if there were different culprits for the specific failures. Some additional factors to consider. We didn't look at any individual operators. So individual operator error and subsequent training process. One thing to look at, if we have a guy that's consistently producing in the 90s, kind of see what he's doing and disseminate that information throughout the rest of the employees who are, some of the guys that are having problems. Maybe some guys just specifically were not good at this job. Currently we rotate different employees through different machines. That's why we have different percentages of time spent on the specific machine. So we have employees that will work 1 week here, 1 week there, and then come over to the machine. And what we're saying is one of our recommendations is we got to reduce that because the guys who are spending the most time on the machines are creating the best products for us. Also, what happened in the last few weeks? Was there a change in vendors? Are these problems that we're having now at the end of the line? Is that coming from further up the line, or is there a lower yield rate throughout the whole process, or is it just us? That's something that needs to be looked at. Also, the other processes within the plant are running 2 and 3 shifts. This specific pigtail process is only running 1 shift, but we don't have any data suggesting whether somebody's coming off of a 3rd shift on another machine and then walking over to ours and picking up an extra shift, and whether that could be somewhat damaging. And as I mentioned earlier, the overall productivity and the yield rates from the other machines would be really nice to have to see if we're very far off or if it's a company-wide or plant-wide problem. These are some of the things we should consider, and thank you. Any questions?
Does the problem say if so the problem was getting worse and worse. Does it say if it was constantly worse, or if it was just from a base level to something very, very bad immediately?
No, it's simply said in the last few weeks that the problem is getting worse.
Okay, so maybe it's not the vendor.
Well, yeah, we don't know that though.
Maybe it's what?
I said maybe it's not necessarily the vendor. I would guess that if the problem is with the vendor, that it will dramatically drop.
It's possible.
And I have another question.
When you ran the regression, you said you saw operator experience between 18 and 24 months. So how significant was that difference? Because that, having seen somebody do something for a year and a half versus 2 years doesn't seem like much of a difference versus like, see a guy that works for the same company doing the same thing for like 30 years. He's seen everything under the sun where a year and a half to 2 years really doesn't.
Yeah, I misspoke there. It's supposed to be 48 months, so 4 years, not 2
Okay.
years. Yeah.
But that is the entire range, it's only 18 to 48 months, there's nobody in there with 30 years experience. But, yeah, it's too.
And would it be I don't know, like if we are not able to solve the problem, do you think like outsourcing that particular step would be an option?
That's an economics issue. I mean, we're at a yield rate of 61%. And this is a late stage manufacturing problem, so we're scrapping all the stages before that. I mean, you can't fix it once it's done. You have to just toss the part out. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense economically. I don't see why that shouldn't be considered.
We use maintenance to get the yield right. And you said that it took just a few weeks to go down, but I don't know if you knew when was the last maintenance done, because if it was a few weeks, you just get 1.5 parts. Like, since the problem started, and you were talking about you using the maintenance,
So
it was a few weeks only, right? So it probably would be 1 month or 2 months.
So the data we have is for the previous year.
Yeah.
And it's been a problem for a year. It's just saying that
It's gotten worse in the last.
it's just been getting worse.
Where it was just a welding problem, now it's modules are failing on a temperature cycle.
So we don't have any data that's broken out over the past just a couple weeks, or 3 weeks. The data is just for the previous year, so that's the only way we could analyze it. But it is definitely something we want to look at, is getting specifically what happened the last 3 weeks, or last few weeks.
So what tools did you apply here? I'm sorry, I'm blacked out, I guess.
We ran a regression.
You did run a regression, because I didn't recall any kind of regression
Yeah,
results.
it didn't, the previous time when we ran regression equations and everyone presented in the class, we're all talking about like p-values.
Right,
and
right,
R-squared
right,
values,
yeah.
and that didn't seem like it was effective for the message we were trying to do.
Oh, okay. So, but you did run a regression, and your insights are based on a regression model.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. That's what I thought, and then all of a sudden I was, before I give my grand speech here, I wanted to make sure I should be careful.
Yeah,
Okay.
the slide about the percentage changes, those come from the coefficients of the regression model that we ran. The 0.46% for a 1% increase and a 1 month.
Okay, and from that you have detailed recommendations on what to do to improve the situation. Is that?
That's where the recommendations came from, the regression.
All right. So how long did it take you to do this?
More the number of regression models we ran, it took a while. I don't know.
So.
Time. He ran most of the regression.
A few hours or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a few hours for, if you come up with some recommendation in this environment for real, there's nothing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you get manufacturing back on track, you basically get sales done and so on, right? What else would it take before you can do your regression?
It's the capturing the data.
Capturing the data.
And figuring out what the specific items are. Our R-squared value for this whole process, like the maximum was around 60.68. So there's definitely some other factors in there that we haven't addressed, and that's why we went into, what else we need to look at. And
Well, I mean, you could also argue the 68 and the rest is really random noise, but there are probably other factors. But the point I'm trying to make here is that once you have the data, the actual work can be very quickly done and be very powerful, right? The point here is, the moral of the story is to actually make sure, even if a process is running smoothly, that you collect data, right? Because if you don't have the data, if you would be at this point and you look at your process and say, hey, well, we don't have any data, let's start collecting data, then it becomes weeks, if not months, before you can do anything. But if you get into the habit of collecting data, even for well-working processes, then the actual analysis typically is very quickly, right? And that's the whole idea about analytically oriented companies, that you really just start to develop a culture for collecting data, for collecting it correctly, for making sure it's accurate, it's stored properly and available to people that need it at the click of a button, and you don't have to start running around, and start fact-finding. Because if that's the case, you're much less likely to actually do an analysis like that. But if you know, well, we have lots of data here, and at most it takes me about 3 hours to do an analysis, you may take the chance. Because one problem with data analysis is that in the end you may not find anything. So if you do a big data collection effort, and after 5 months you don't find anything, you look like a fool. If the data is there and you don't find anything, after 3 hours you don't look like a fool. So the story or the moral here is, wherever you are, try to get into a habit of making data part of the daily life.
So do you mean like the extra data that we said you would need? Is that what you're...
No. Even the data that you already have. Someone in that company must have made a decision at some point to start collecting data. Right? And that was the right decision. What you are saying now is that's further improving the process. You're saying, okay, here's additional data that we would like to have in the future, so start collecting that too. But make those points and become a data-driven company. All right? Excellent job. I thought I really, besides my blanking out about, in the end, did they use a regression or not, I really felt I was all the way with you there, and I understood the problem very well. So, well done.